Welcome, everyone. My name is Mary Waldron. I'm the Executive Director of Old Colony Planning Council. In particular, this session today, it's unique in the sense of the work that Paul Lumano's been doing on Grantology, and then partnering with the CEDS. So these two staff members, they've known each other for a long time, and I've known them. But to see them work together on this has been like a symphony, in the sense of giving another sense of information for all of you and your communities. So I just want to give accolades to both Nick Giaquinto and also to Paul Lumano. Their desks are side by side, so I giggle sometimes because it's like how that juice flows between the two of them. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce Nick Giaquinto, who will be running this session today. So, Nick.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you everyone on here for tuning in, and welcome to a special edition of Old Colony Planning Council's Grantology series, which is our new online resource for providing educational content that helps towns in our network navigate the many grant programs and funding resources that are available to them. Through the support of OCPC's Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy Committee, which we refer to as CEDS, we partner with Paul Lumano, Senior Grant Specialist here at OCPC, and host of the Grantology series to offer this special edition focusing specifically on programs that impact or enhance economic development. There are just so many programs out there now, and I think from the perspective of communities in our region and beyond who have very limited capacity, it's often not feasible to dedicate a lot of time to researching opportunities, let alone piecing together and actually writing extensive grant applications. So with this webinar, we thought it would be helpful if we sort of packaged or bundled the most important programs together that we as planners tend to focus our efforts on for communities in our southeastern Massachusetts region. So we really rely on your grant awards to catalyze or be the impetus for impactful projects in the district that we can then support, and that's key. Having said all that, a lot of this information will not be new for some of you, but for those folks, hopefully it will be helpful finding all of the key information in one place that you can use at a glance. You know Paul Lumano at all, he's an expert on this stuff and is very good at what he does, so we're hoping to sort of filter his knowledge and expertise on this subject to our community. So we're taking advantage of that. With that, enjoy the webinar, and hopefully you'll find this information useful. And I'll pass it over to Bob Bruley, Chairman of OCPC CEDS Committee and Director of Community and Economic Development at the town of Bridgewater.
Thanks, Nick, and thanks everyone for participating today. As Mary said earlier, the combination of talent between Nick and Paul is serving OCPC very well. As somebody that writes a lot of grants, anything that I can learn to expedite that process is always appreciated. For those of you that are communities that are in compliance with MBTA communities, there's a ton of grant money available, as well as grant funding that's available through the federal government as well. So thanks again for participating. CEDS is really happy to be part of this presentation, and hopefully we learn a lot today. Thanks everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Mary. Appreciate the introduction. So we're just going to really dive right into it. So I do want to first, for those of you who are not familiar with Grantology, just give you a brief overview of what that is, but really to take a deep dive into the One-Stop Community for Growth programs. As Nick mentioned, a lot of you are familiar with the One-Stop program, but this is a real good opportunity for us to really take a deep dive into all of the programs that the One-Stop offers, many of which again, you're mostly familiar with, having worked with these programs, but also to take a dive into the EDA federal programs that are available, and then also look into business development grants and opportunities. So we'll be taking a dive again into One-Stop. We'll be taking a dive into the EDA grants, many of those related to public infrastructure, planning, technical assistance, jobs and innovation, and then there's the business side of things, right? So the MGCC has some great programs that I want you guys to be aware of, as well as the Mass Office of Business Development has some great programs. And then, of course, the Small Business Administration has also some wonderful programs. So as I mentioned, from many of you may not know what Grantology is. So Grantology really is a once to twice a month webinar series that I put on for our communities, and it really gives you an opportunity to take a look at what grants are out there and available, and really to take a deep dive into what's available for your communities, but also to provide hopefully some helpful strategies and tips and things that I've learned along the way in my time having worked here with Old Colony Planning Council, but also previously with the city of Brockton. So I'm really excited to be able to share that information with you all on a regular basis. And of course, today focusing on programs that are related to economic development. So the One Stop Community for Growth, it has a wealth of different programs that are available under it. It's really a streamlined one-stop shop application application process for your communities. So it offers you the opportunity to apply for up to 5 single applications in one portal. And it's designed to allow you to apply for multiple different programming, multiple phases or multiple facets of a particular project. And the programs fall under really 3 distinct programs. So you have the Executive Office of Economic Development. So there's 4 programs under that. So you have the Mass Works Infrastructure Program, the Urban Agenda Program, MDI, which is the Massachusetts Downtown Initiative. You also have the Rural Development Fund, which falls under that as well. And then there's the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. So you have the Housing Choice Grant Program, the Community Planning Grant Program, and then the Housing Works Infrastructure Program. And then finally, you have several programs under mass development. So you have the Underutilized Properties Program. There's a Site Readiness Program. There's a lot of focus on brownfields. There's also a Collaborative Workspace Program, and then also a Real Estate Services and Technical Assistance Grant program that is available for communities as well. So again, this is really to take a deep dive into all of these, and we'll get started with one of the ones I think is the most important and a lot of your communities have applied for. But before I do that, just wanted to give you a sense of what the timeline is for the One Stop program. So typically the application opens up in January with expressions of interest around the February timeframe. And those are usually accepted all the way through April. And then once that period has occurred, there's usually some time for webinars and program seminars to help you be more aware of some of the new requirements that are out through the One Stop or anything that may have changed from the previous iteration of the program. And then the full application period opens from around May to June, with a closing usually at the end of June. And then the review and evaluation period typically is between June and September, with the award notifications going out in September, which it did this year. And congratulations to the communities that did receive grants this cycle. And then the contracting is occurring right now, so October, November. Just as a slight caveat, the time frame could change for FY26, but it relatively remains within a month or two of the time frame that you see here.
Paul, just a quick tidbit on that too. I think part of what the timeline for One Stop, some of the changes usually revolve around when awards are being announced. I know most of them were made in October, I think, this year, but if there's a deviation in the timeline for the One Stop, it's usually around whenever the awards are going to come out. There's usually, there could be some delay, but that's the time to pay. If you've applied through the One Stop and you're looking to find out whether you've been funded or not, you want to keep your ear to the ground sometime around the fall between September and October. And on the previous slide, Paul, I just wanted to clarify, there are 12 programs in the One Stop, but you can apply for up to 5 different projects. So I just wanted to make that clear. So there's 12 different programs, but you essentially would be able to submit 5 different applications through the one portal that each could go to its own program. So I just wanted to clarify that, Paul. Thanks.
Thanks, Nick. All right, so one of the first programs in the One Stop is the Mass Works Infrastructure Program. So this provides capital funds to municipalities and public entities for public infrastructure projects. And this can support, can support a range of things. So it can support housing production, it can spur private development, but most importantly, it creates jobs. So it emphasizes multifamily housing. It can be a mixed-use district, but also is aimed to boost economic development in distressed areas. So as we look at the table that's before you, we wanted to cover a litany of different things as it relates to these programs. So first and foremost, the eligible applicants are municipalities or their designee on their behalf. And there are essentially two uses for the MassWorks infrastructure program. So there's a pre-development portion to it, and then there's also a direct construction. So the pre-development is related to your design, your permitting, and your engineering as it relates to a potential project. But then there's also the direct construction, which I know a majority of folks are looking to apply for the direct construction, dealing with roadway improvements, streetscape improvements. It could be related to a bridge or culvert repair or replacement. It can be a water sewer infrastructure project, a public utilities project related to gas or electric, et cetera. So those are the two main grant uses for the program. So if you're applying for an infrastructure project, typically the award is up to $5 million. If you're talking about a small town road improvement project, you're talking around $1 million improvement project. And then if you're doing a pre-development project, it is $500,000 maximum award. So when you're making the decision to determine whether you're doing a pre-development or direct construction project, you want to take a look at the match. So there is a 25% match requirement with this grant. So for communities that aren't able to, number one, either provide the 25% match that's required for the grant, or is not where they need to be in terms of design, typically you want at least be at 25% design, then you may want to consider a pre-development application to do that design and preliminary engineering. So that's where you would apply for the $500,000 to do pre-development. And then when the one-stop rolls around again, you may want to consider doing an infrastructure project. But for those that are able to provide the 25% match and are committed to the design, then they can apply for a direct construction grant worth up to the $5 million. So I just wanted to make that distinction with this grant. And again, this is held annually through the competitive one-stop. But we also wanted to give you a project example as well. So a recent awardee was Hanover. They received a $1.26 million grant for their crossing mixed-use redevelopment project. So this was an intersection and street improvement project where they've done $225 million in redevelopment of the former Hanover Mall for mixed housing and open air retail. So just give you a sense of some of the success stories that we've been seeing as it relates to our communities and how this money has impacted them in a positive way. So another program through the One Stop, I know many of you are familiar with, is the Massachusetts Downtown Initiative. So this one is really focusing on technical assistance and funding to municipalities for projects that enhance economic vitality, community involvement, and downtown character. So really what this is aiming to do is to help communities create vibrant, healthy, and prosperous downtowns. And essentially what this does is the state essentially will bring in a consultant to help you do a lot of that work. So the grant use is strictly for technical assistance. So whether that be you're creating a bid document, whether you're doing downtown design, whether you're doing economic or business development analyses or studies, this could include mobility and placemaking. Wayfinding is also another component to this grant. And of course, this also offers small business support services. So this is a grant that's on the smaller side of things, but nonetheless very important for communities in our region. And this offers up to $25,000 in funding. And again, while there's no match requirement, typically with this, and as you'll see, there isn't a match or a match requirement as we move forward. But my usual take on this and rule of thumb has always been try to utilize as much as you can in terms of match, whether it's a required match or not. I think that will make your application more competitive and obviously more susceptible to be funded moving forward.
Well, I want to jump in real
Sure.
quick on this. I wanted to say important tidbit of information. I want to underscore under grant use, placemaking. So, you know, the statewide grant program that we used to have for placemaking was called Commonwealth Places. And those were for awards for projects ranging up to $100,000. Since that program no longer exists, I want to point out that this is a viable alternative. While there's a difference in funding, right? Commonwealth Places was for projects that can get up to $100,000. This is capped at $25,000. But if you're a community, or if you're someone who's looking to do some sort of placemaking project, MDI does fund placemaking proposals. So they're for a much smaller amount, like I mentioned, but as far as I know, I think that's the only placemaking program the Commonwealth has at this point. So if you're looking to do placemaking activities, MDI is a good place to take a look at. Thanks, Paul. I just wanted to throw that in there.
Great. No, that's great. Thanks, Nick. So a good project example for this is the town of Stoughton in our district. They received a $25,000 grant to create a report related to their train station and to support their downtown revitalization efforts by exploring the reuse of their depot and improving access and connectivity to the area. So another great example of how this program in particular has impacted the communities in our region. And of course, not to be forgotten, there are rural communities that can benefit from the One-Stop program. So the One-Stop offers the Rural Development Fund that supports the unique economic needs and challenges faced by these smaller communities. So it provides grants for those that meet the definition of a rural community, which is a population of 7,000 or less, and have a population density of 500 persons per square mile, according to the latest 2020 U.S. Census data. So for our region, the towns that are eligible for the Rural Development Fund are Avon, Halifax, Plimpton, and West Bridgewater. So what are some of the things that you can do under the Rural Development Fund? So there's quite a few things. So you can do some planning and zoning through consultant services, similar to the previous grant. It's available for site preparation. If you if there's a project that requires a consultant or an engineering to come on board, there's opportunities for building and construction through the Rural Development Fund. Hiring a consultant, hiring an engineer, hiring a contractor to work on a specific project. And then finally, there's the infrastructure piece to this, right? And actually continuing to work with that engineer and contractor on the infrastructure piece to the project. And then in terms of funding for this, so if you're looking to do a planning and zoning application, you can apply for up to $100,000 through this program. And then all other categories, so whether that be site prep, the building and construction, or infrastructure, can be up to $500,000 in funding. So just noting the application requirement, again, to make this competitive, any local or private sources of funding that you can provide as it relates to the grant would make it more competitive moving forward, but there is no requirement specifically under this program. And again, the frequency of this is it's held once a year under the One-Stop. And we wanted to recognize the town of Avon that was awarded recently a $150,000 grant through the Rural Development Fund to update its master plan to bring together standalone elements of the previous plan up to date, as well as some other older elements, including incorporating principles of sustainability, the concepts of resiliency, equity, diversity, and inclusion through broad community participation. So I wanted to recognize the town of Avon for their work on the Rural Development Fund.
And Paul, you'll notice with this program that for these 4 communities that we have here, it's probably worth noting that you'll notice that there's some overlap with this program and some of the others, and that's purposeful. That's the intent of this. So you'll see site prep, planning and zoning, so that's site readiness and community planning grant. If you're Avon, Halifax, Plimpton, or West Bridgewater, and you have a project that is eligible for site readiness and community planning grant and so forth, this is the program where your application is going to be far more competitive. So just something to keep in mind for those 4 communities in our district.
Absolutely. And that's actually a good segue, because similar to that, you have the Community Planning Grant Program, which does a lot of the same things, but obviously different source of funding. It provides funding for technical assistance for community planning projects that support sustainable and equitable growth by helping communities plan for future needs and challenges. So eligible applicants are the same under the program, and it also can include regional planning agencies. Also can include this one, economic development corporations, if they so choose to apply. And some of the uses for the community planning grant include professional services related to community planning, such as zoning and housing production. Strategic planning documents can be developed under this program to help guide community development as it relates to housing, infrastructure, and zoning in particular. The funding under this is communities can apply for up to 150,000, either as a single entity or multiple eligible applicants can join up for a joint application for this. There is no match requirement for this, but should include at least a 10% cash match to make this competitive. And with this grant, you'll actually receive bonus points if you do so. So something to keep in mind for this one. Again, this is all through the One Stop. And we want to recognize the town of Kingston that was awarded recently a $50,000 grant through this to update its housing production plan. And essentially this helped the town address its future housing needs and development. So again, another great tool for our communities in the region. Okay, shifting gears a little bit as we're moving on down the line of all the programs here in the One Stop is the underutilized property program. So this is a capital improvement and code compliance related grant to help improve, rehabilitate, or redevelop blighted, abandoned, vacant, or underutilized properties. So the goal really here is to eliminate blight, increase housing production, support economic development, and make commercial buildings really more accessible. The eligible applicants remains relatively the same. So you have the lead applicant, can be a municipality, economic development district, industrial corporation, or in this case, it can also be a nonprofit or private sector entity that can apply. Some of the uses that we're seeing for the program is related to capital improvements and pre-development activities. So this can be really more along the lines of the capital side of things. So you can do building stabilization, it can be roof repair, HVAC, system improvements, tenant improvements, code compliance, etc. So really focusing on that side of things with this grant. As far as the funding is concerned, there's really no set max with this, but typical awards have ranged from anywhere from $50,000 up to $1 million. With this one, there is no match requirement, but again, if you provide a match, it'll make your grant more competitive. A project example we wanted to highlight was actually here in the city of Brockton. So NeighborWorks was awarded a $650,000 grant to redevelop the former Grayson Hotel here in the city. So that essentially provided 16 units of additional affordable housing, including ground floor retail and a minority-owned farmhouse, cidery, and market in that facility. So it's a really exciting project for the city, particularly here in the downtown as well. And I also want to mention this is the newest program under the One Stop, and we're seeing increasing demand as it relates to applications for this one. So if this is one of interest or one that certainly fits your community's needs, then definitely encourage you to apply for this program. Next, we have the Site Readiness Program. Has some similarities to the previous one, but aims to increase the state's inventory of large, well-located projects-ready sites to accelerate private sector, industrial, commercial, and mixed-use projects. So this supports the conversion of abandoned sites and facilities into clean, actively used tax-generating properties. So under this program, the eligible applicants are the same. So municipalities, economic development organizations, industrial corporations, but this one can also include private property owners and nonprofit entities. And the uses for this grant are related to funding for site assembly, site assessment. Some pre-development activities can be engaged in under this program, but it's mainly, again, for commercial, industrial, or mixed-use development. This is also one that doesn't have a maximum award set, but awards have typically ranged from 50,000 up to 500,000. Again, no match with this one, but to be competitive, definitely consider providing a match. And for this program, wanted to recognize Hanson that was provided a $100,000 grant to support the redevelopment of their 7.3 acre vacant land that abuts the town's industrial park. So the funds were essentially used to establish a wetland resource area, to take a look at the soil conditions and the subdivision that has emerged in that area. So another great example of a program that was funded in our region. Right, and then we also have the Brownfields program. I know this is near and dear to Nick's heart because it's a mass development program. Just wanted to mention that this is indeed the state program, because EPA actually has their own as well. They have a 4-year Brownfields, but this one, strictly going with our theme here, is particular to the one-stop. So the Brownfields grant provides either assessment or remediation of brownfield sites, which are often vacant and underutilized properties contaminated by pollutants. So the idea with this is to improve public health, the environment, obviously boosting local economies by remediating brownfield sites, but also this helps with technical assistance in navigating the complexities of doing a brownfield redevelopment. So the eligible applicants, again, can be any Massachusetts community. It can be any economic development district or a nonprofit organization can apply for this as well. And again, this is to do either a site assessment or remediation done by a licensed professional or a licensed remediation contractor. So depending on the track that you choose, what the need is, you can do a site assessment for up to $250,000 or a remediation grant for up to $750,000. Similar to the previous programs, there's not a strict match, but makes it more competitive if you do provide a match. As a good project example for this one, the town of East Bridgewater received a $99,700 grant to perform an environmental assessment at the Precise Engineering site, which ultimately led to the redevelopment into a commercial and industrial use site. So I wanted to recognize East Bridgewater for their work with the Brownfields program. Okay. And then last, for the specific one-stops programs related to economic development, we have the Real Estate Services Technical Assistance Program. So this provides guidance and resources for planning and development projects tied to the redevelopment of public surplus property or the adoption of district management tools. So essentially, this program helps address site-specific and district-wide economic development challenges through a combination of in-house or third-party consultants, depending on which track the community ends up going with. The eligible applicants are the same, but also includes redevelopment authorities, industrial corporation, and housing authorities can also apply for the Real Estate Services Technical Assistance Grant. So 2 different grant uses with this. So you can do a site concept and market feasibility study, or put out for a competitive RFQ or RFP. This also provides for district redevelopment technical assistance. So that can be in the form of redevelopment, corridor studies, or a district improvement financing plan. This grant has funding available for up to $50,000. And there is a match requirement for this one, up to 25% of the total project cost. And a project example in our region is the town of Plymouth received a $50,000 grant to do a feasibility study for the Cottage Park Commerce Center. So the project is aimed for assessing mixed-use development that includes residential, commercial, and public spaces. So a really great use of the Cottage Park space in the town of Plymouth. So the other portion of this we want to talk about is some of the not necessarily economic development specific programs, but what we're terming the quasi-ED one-stop programs that we believe are just as relevant. Housing is a component of economic development. And we want to mention two of the main housing-related economic development boosting grants that are provided through the one-stop. So two of the main ones, one more on the planning side as we look at the housing choice, and then the housing works more on the infrastructure side of things. So the housing choice essentially provides incentives, technical assistance, and targeted legislative reform for municipalities to address their housing stock. So this essentially rewards municipalities that have produced a significant number of housing units. So there are a couple of different tracks that you can apply for under this. So you can do a site prep, building infrastructure grant. Typical awards are between 50,000 and 300,000 under that. There's also a planning and zoning grant award that's up to $100,000 through that program. Just want to recognize three of our communities that are housing choice, which are Brockton, Bridgewater, and Easton, and they participate actively in the program and actually have their own housing choice designations. So I wanted to recognize them. And then on the infrastructure side of things is the Housing Works program. So this provides support for infrastructure projects that can unlock new housing opportunities for our communities. So this is focusing on enhancing housing, but also transportation and community development to increase housing production, as well as improve community infrastructure. So there is really no funding cap on this side of things. Typically, the awards have ranged from 300,000 on the minimum side to up to 5 million. But on average, we've seen our communities receive up to $2.5 million in funding through the Housing Works grant program. And then an example of a community that most recently has received Housing Works grant is the town of Abington, my new hometown. They've received a $500,000 grant to plan, design, and permit roadway improvements to their MBTA commuter rail station, supporting 198 and 144 new units. There will be improvements to the sidewalks. There's a whole ADA upgrade plan for Summer and Plymouth Street, as well as additional improvement, safety, and accessibility as it relates to the MBTA station. So I wanted to recognize the town of Abington and their work on the Housing Works program. And then the last two I want to mention as it relates to One Stop, and then we'll actually get into some EDA grants. Some of these you may not be as familiar with, but hopefully, as impactful. Just wanted to mention two more, the Collaborative Workspace Program and then Urban Agenda. So the Collaborative Workspace Program is just another tool for communities to do collaborative workspace and makerspace. So there's two different ways to do that, either through a seed grant, through pre-development, or a fit-out grant, which are essentially build-out improvements. So the seed grants offer $15,000 in funding, and if you're doing a build-out, that's up to $100,000 in funding. Plymouth actually received a $100,000 build-out grant for the Plymouth Regional Economic Development Foundation to create a fully functional collaborative workspace in downtown Plymouth. So this is a full bore, deals with renovations, furnishing, technology upgrades. So really great co-op space there that was developed thanks to this program. And then last but not least, we have the Urban Agenda program, which funds community-driven projects aimed at focusing on economic development opportunities related to leadership, collaboration, economic vitality, and developing stronger neighborhoods. So we've seen grant awards up to $100,000, in funding. Don't have a specific example of communities that have received this most recently, but I just wanted to give a shout out to the work that the Downtown Brockton Association does, and they received a grant application for $100,000 this year. So really great job to the team on that, and more details forthcoming.
Paul, a quick tidbit on collaborative workspace. I'd just like to emphasize or point out that a lot of people associate the collaborative workspace program in mass development as one that is like strictly for gateway cities or cities. across the Commonwealth. And I can tell you, I think the program managers, the people who run this program in the agency, are probably eager to fund projects in suburban communities. I know the town of Situate had received a grant, and you referenced the project in Plymouth, but it would be incorrect to assume that only applications for collaborative workspace are funded for gateway cities. So certainly would encourage communities in the OCPC network to consider this program, as many of those applications would probably be very competitive for most of the communities, or a lot of the communities in our district.
Excellent. Thanks, Nick. All right, now I wanted to get into some EDA related federal grant opportunities that are available to our communities. So one of the ones I wanted to highlight first off is the Public Works and Economic Adjustment EDA grant program. So this program provides funding to help distressed communities revitalize, expand, and upgrade their infrastructure to support long-term economic development. So this offers communities flexible assistance for regions that are expanding, that are experiencing sudden or long-term economic changes, either caused by shifts in industry or natural disasters. So applicants that are eligible for this program include economic development districts, certainly cities or towns and their political subdivisions, but also public, private, and nonprofit entities are eligible, and institutes of higher education. I do want to mention before I go into detail on this program that anyone that is interested in applying for an EDA grant program is required to coordinate with their regional planning agency in order to submit an application. So if this is something, as we move forward through these, that you're interested in applying for, definitely reach out to us, reach out to Nick. This is really the crux of the work we do here at OCPC to support the economic development efforts in the region and make a lot of these infrastructure projects a reality for your communities or for your particular entity. So again, if these are something you're interested in, definitely reach out to us, and we'll coordinate with you all on this. So with that being said, with this program in particular, there are a multitude of different things that can be funded. So one of the main things is public infrastructure improvements related to site acquisition, site prep, construction, and rehabilitation. There's also a strategic development component, so developing, updating, or refining plans that essentially create a roadmap for long-term economic development in the community. And as noted, this offers funding for disaster recovery. So there's assistance for regions recovering from natural disasters. Luckily, we haven't run into that, tap on wood, recently, but could be an option if that ever would arise. There's also opportunity for workforce development, right? So supporting job training and reemployment initiatives. And then there's also the revolving loan funds through the program that help provide some additional loan funding that could be available. So this program offers up to $30 million in funding that's been appropriated. Typically awards range from approximately $500,000 to up to $2 million. There is a match requirement with this, and you'll see that there are match requirements for most EDA grants. It's 50% or from non-federal sources. The applications are accepted on a rolling basis, so that actually means that you can apply at any point. And a great example of a project in our community is the town of East Bridgewater received a $3 million grant to extend its sewer into Route 18. It's through Brockton, and that also leverages $100 million in private investment and has resulted in the creation of 700 new jobs.
Paul, just another quick tidbit on this EDA program. I think for purposes of our region, OCPC's region, applications to the EDA for public infrastructure projects, or I should say construction projects, are very competitive. I'm just, having done some work now on the region and with EDA and getting a sense of what it is the EDA prefers or likes to see. and considering the needs in our region, right? We don't, we have a lot of septic, right? We don't have a lot of sewer access. So, this project in East Bridgewater was right up the alley of what the EDA is really striving for. So, as we do more work with our communities and think about industrial areas and lack of sewer access in these particular areas, construction projects are going to be the most competitive with the EDA.
Great. Okay, so EDA actually offers their own planning and local technical assistance program. So this helps communities develop their economic plans and studies to help build capacity and enhance economic resiliency. So this supports local organizations like municipalities, economic development districts with both short and long-term planning efforts. So again, eligible applicants remain relatively the same. That includes the public and private nonprofit and institutes of higher education. So what you can do through this local technical assistance program, feasibility studies to assess the practicality and success of proposed EDIs. You can do an impact analysis, evaluate potential economic effects of proposed projects or policies. You can also do a disaster resiliency plan through this grant to help prepare your community for a natural disaster or emergency. There's a project planning component to do detailed strategies and action plans for economic development efforts. And then lastly, there's a capacity building effort to be able to enhance the work that local communities do to undertake and promote economic development projects. So there is up to $30 million appropriated to this program. Max awards with this typically vary and are usually within the $300,000 range we found looking through some previous project examples. And again, there is a match requirement, so it's a 50% non-federal match. This one is also provided on a rolling basis, meaning you can actually apply at any point. And another Plymouth grant that we wanted to highlight was the master plan for the 1,500-acre vacant portion of the Holtec property, which is a former Pilgrim nuclear power station. So they received a $335,000 grant through this planning and local technical assistance program in collaboration with Holtec International and the Plymouth Foundation.
And Paul, I guess I'd point out, just because we didn't reference this in this slide or the last, I know, Paul, I want to emphasize the protocol or requirement for the EDA that, if a town or a community is interested in pursuing a project through the EDA, that you have to go through your regional planning agency. So that would be us. And in these two particular projects with the town of Plymouth, and in the previous one, we mentioned the East Bridgewater Sewer Project, Don Sullivan, who's the Director of Economic Development here, had worked closely with both of these communities to get these projects moving. So these are just two examples of two projects that we've been able to move here at OCPC, coordinating with the EDA.
Awesome. Right, and then there is also a Build to Scale EDA grant that is actually focused more on entrepreneurial activities and helping entrepreneurs build and scale technology-driven business endeavors. So this program essentially funds innovators and startups that are looking to develop emerging technologies to drive economic growth in the region. So this is also open for cities and towns and political subdivisions of the state. But this is also open to nonprofits, higher ed institutes, public-private partnerships that may fund as results of this. There's also science or research-related organizations that can apply, as well as ED-related organizations. And essentially what this can do is it supports innovators and entrepreneurs. So again, incubator and accelerator programs that help entrepreneurial programs get their startup. It's developing emerging technologies or projects that focus on creating and bringing new technology products to the market under this. This is also a capacity building program for entrepreneurs in an effort to strengthen the infrastructure network and support high growth technology businesses. And then finally, this is a great way to access capital and initiatives that increase the available funding for early stage companies. So really a great startup program for entrepreneurs. I just would like to mention, I know that this program may seem a little bit out of reach, but it's really not. And again, as Nick said, EDA is a lot of the work we do with them is done here with OCPC. We provide that in-house service, and this is something that would be right up the alley of many of our communities. So we have a great relationship with them, and I think that this could be a wonderful opportunity for those looking to expand their businesses. This is up to a $5 million award. There is the note of the one-to-one match from non-federal sources, and the application is accepted on an annual basis. While not in our district, and a good example of a project that was funded nearby was the Mansfield Bioincubator. They received a $1.25 million project to support their biotech industry. So the incubator provides lab space, provides a source of mentorship for the community, as well as resources to start up early biotech companies and help them really grow and scale their operations. So I think this is a wonderful opportunity if any one of you in our community decides to apply for this grant. And then I'd like to close on the EDA side of things with the Good Jobs Challenge. This is an initiative aimed at funding regional workforce systems and sectoral partnerships to train workers in the needed job skills that we're seeing. So it focuses on creating equitable career opportunities, transforming local economies by supporting high quality, locally led workforce development. So this is, again, open up to the same eligible applicants that we discussed before. The grant use for this is for designing and implementing workforce training programs, establishing sectoral partnerships between employers, employees, training providers, community organizations. And this is really to develop support services for your community and really developing those career pathways for those looking to get into the local economy and the local trades. So I did want to mention that this is an ARPA-funded program. The previous award ranges have been from $1 million to $8 million. Given that we're nearing the end of ARPA, we're not quite sure if this one is going to continue. We'll certainly keep you posted on that. But nonetheless, we wanted to let you know that this is still out there, is still available at the current time. Whether it will be going forward, we're not sure. The hope is that it will. With this, there is no match required, but again, would make it competitive if you did. And again, the frequency of this is going to depend on whether this continues, as it is, again, an ARPA-funded project. But a great example of a community that did receive this, although not in our district, was Springfield received funding to support a workforce development in healthcare, transportation, distribution, logistics, and education services. So aims to create career pathways to qualified jobs for residents in the Springfield area, and of course, focusing on underserved communities. So this is a really great program. Again, we do hope that it continues moving forward. All right, so we've covered a lot of things here. So we've covered economic development, we've covered EDA, but we also want to cover the business side of things, and we'd be remiss not to talk about the Mass Growth Capital Corporation, or MGCC, and some of the programs that they offer. So one of the ones that they offer is the Biz Empower crowdfunding campaign. So this helps small businesses with financial assistance for the acquisition, expansion, improvement, or lease of a facility. This can also be the purchase or lease of equipment or other capital needs. So this is a $20,000 grant and requires a one-to-one match. There is also the CDFI and CDC Capital Match Program, or the Community Development Financial Institution and Community Development Corporation Match Program. So this provides new sources of matching funds for programs seeking to spur economic development, support entrepreneurship, small business recovery and sustainability, and resiliency. So this is a $200,000 grant, requires a 50% match. You notice a lot of these are 50% or one-to-one match. So it's really splitting the difference between what the state side of things or the federal side of things give you and what the local community seeks to contribute into the grant. And then we also have the Small Business Technical Assistance Program to round this one out. So this one builds operational capacity and skills of organizations that are providing technical assistance, education, and access to capital and small businesses. So the program strengthens ongoing business activities and low to moderate income in underserved communities. So this is a $100,000 program, but actually with no match. We've seen this be awarded typically to community development corporations, Chamber of Commerce, or other similar nonprofit agencies. So if you fall within any of those categories, I encourage you to apply for small businesses technical assistance grants. Okay, and then we also have the Small Business Administration. So 3 programs under the SBA I wanted to highlight. So Small Business Innovation Research Program. So this encourages small businesses to engage in federal research and development with the potential for future commercialization. There's a Small Business Technical Transfer Program. So this program expands funding opportunities and federal innovation and in research and development for public and private sector partnerships. This can be between small businesses and nonprofit research institutions. And then lastly, we have the State Trade Expansion Program. So this provides financial awards to state and territory governments to help with their small business and export development. So,
And Paul,
really,
I would just
really great
mention with
programs.
these last 6 programs, you know, if you're a business and you're looking for some sort of assistance, you know, a lot of people have the tendency to gravitate toward lending, loans, guarantees, stuff like that. And I think what's good about these programs is these are purely grants. So they're, you know, they can be tough to come by. They're hard to come by because, you know, there's always some sort of catch. These are purely grant programs. So whether you're a community or you're a business, some of these programs require partnerships, you know, like if you're a CDC and you're going after these funds, a partnership is necessary, you know, to be a competitive application. But these are 6 good programs that don't put you on the hook for having to pay money back or anything like that. So that's, you know, one of the reasons we wanted to highlight these.
Great, that's fantastic. And then we have one more. So these are additional business development programs through the MOBD, or the Massachusetts Office of Business Development. So I wanted to highlight 2 more for you. So the Massachusetts Vacant Storefronts Program. So this helps municipalities revitalize their downtown and commercial areas through designated certified vacant storefront districts. So this can be businesses or individuals leasing or occupying a vacant storefront can apply for these tax credits. So it's up to $10,000 in refundable tax credits, if that applies to you. And then lastly, we have the Regional Economic Development Organization Grant Program. So this supports organizations that promote regional economic growth by providing funding for projects that enhance business development and job creation. So organizations can receive grants that align with the state's economic development goals, but also foster collaboration and innovation within the region. So within this program, there's up to $250,000 in funding available. So that concludes our rundown of all the programs. Just wanted to make you aware that Grantology itself it's a monthly to bi-monthly webinar series to provide information such as this to you all, and hopefully also some helpful tips and information. This webinar, including the slides, will all live on OCPC's website. You can see our link here below. And also feel free to subscribe to our bi-weekly newsletter, where all of this information will also be available for you all too. Grantology, again, is on the website. You can find a little more information about some of the previous programs I've applied for and in the past, having worked for the city of Brockton and now working here for Old Colony. Again, the link directly to the Grantology is below. You can scan the QR code that you see there, and it's also available on our YouTube page too. So I encourage you all to go there. And then, of course, to get in touch with us, my information is enclosed here as well as Nick's. And that's all I have for you guys. Nick, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Paul. This concludes today's webinar, but we hope you found it useful. And if any of you have any questions at all about the programs discussed or about how we can be helpful in your community's pursuit of funds, please do reach out. As an FYI, sometime in December or in the new year, folks from the state's Executive Office of Economic Development will be hosting a presentation for the OCPC network on the FY26 One-Stop Community for Growth program. So about how to apply, what some of the tracks are for that application, how to fill it out, and how to navigate the application and have a good sense of what the managers of each program are actually looking for. So it covers essentially everything you would want to know about how to submit applications to the one-stop portal and about what certain things program managers are going to be looking for. So when we do have a date selected for that, it'll be announced in our weekly newsletter. We will post both the slide deck and the recording of the webinar to our website, like Paul mentioned. So please feel free to use those as a resource. And Paul and I are always more than happy to talk with you. So don't hesitate to contact us. So I know we have a couple of minutes. I saw Mary's message in the chat. So if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask, we can do our best to answer. And if not, we'll see you soon. And we appreciate you hopping on.
Thank you, Nick and Paul. This has been great.